Hello everyone and anyone, and thank you so much for stopping by. I've been quite surprised over the past few weeks at the number of people who have actually watched some of my recent videos. Look, I get it, I know 80 views isn't exactly a lot for most people, and it's not a lot for YouTube, but outside of my family and my congregations, I don't think I even know 80 people. So it's a big deal to me, so thank you. If you don't know me, my name is Pastor Dan. I am a pastor within the United Methodist denomination, and I reside over a couple of our two churches in Northeast Pennsylvania. If you like what you hear in this video and you want to hear more of what I have to say, please go ahead, hit the notification bell, hit the subscription bell. That way you'll be notified of any new content that's added. And feel free to comment below whether you agree with me or disagree. Now let's get into it. I had planned to do a video on the sort of moral state of our country and to a degree the church. But something else is happening right now in this moment in our country that really struck me this past week that I want to address. I was watching the news recently, and as everyone is hopefully aware, unless you have your head under a rock or in the sand, the main topic of this past week has been this incredible influx of Haitian migrants at the border. Now, let me start off this entire thing by just saying this video is not a defense of any, nor is it an attack on any specific border policies. That's not going to be my point. I'd be willing to do something on that, but there's something else eating me at this particular moment about all of it. But for now, we, of course, have all seen the pictures. We have all seen the footage. And whether you're left, right, or center, hopefully, we can all come together and at least agree that this is a large-scale disaster. I was watching the news recently, and Senator Ted Cruz was on the Senate floor criticizing Congresswoman AOC and much of the mainstream media for their coverage of the border and how seemingly hypocritical they are. Here's a brief clip of that.
I'll tell you, I've been to the border. I've been to the Biden cages. For 4 years, Democrats went on and on and on. The corrupt corporate media went on and on and on about kids in cages. You couldn't turn on the evening news without hearing kids in cages. What they didn't tell you is Barack Obama built those cages, and today under Joe Biden, the cages are bigger and they're more full than they were before.
For 4 years under President Trump, the constant running headline, let's be honest, was just that. As Cruz said, kids in cages. Despite the fact that it was actually President Trump's predecessor who had the cages built and implemented much of the policies that were at that time simply now being enforced. But like I said, this is not a border policy video. It's a video of hypocrisy. But it's a hypocrisy far deeper than simple double talk or double standards. And this isn't so much about the hypocrisy of politicians or leaders either. Because as Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 1:9, there's nothing new under the sun. And let's be honest, hypocritical politicians are nothing new.
How about a crooked politician? It's stupid, that ain't news no more.
I will say it was somewhat of a marvel for me over the past year to see everyone at the beginning of this pandemic so shocked about the rampant hypocrisy that was coming out of the political class. Shutdowns were ordered, people were shut in their homes, restaurants were closed along with theaters and churches. But then, of course, we watched as the political elites went about their business, going to all their favorite restaurants, getting their hair did, all the things we peasants were told was off limits to us. I understood, and I still understand, the frustration so many people had, but I didn't understand the surprise. This whole do as I say, not as I do thing has been a slogan of the elite class for much of history. We should be used to that by now. Let's be real. Leaders around the country and the world command one thing of you that they are unwilling to do themselves. Hollywood wants to lecture us on our morality and our duties as people. Yet many of those same people are criminals, some of the worst. The cultural and political elites simply don't believe themselves what they try to push on others. And we should be angry at that. We should resent that, but we should come to expect it. But, and here's the point of all of this, and the real reason for my ire, we should not expect it, nor should we tolerate it from inside the church. For during those same 4 years, when every mainstream media outlet covered daily those kids in the cages, and everyone condemned those policies, so did much of the institutional church, particularly our own denomination, the United Methodist Church. Some of you may remember this appearing on national news, actually, this coverage of a local United Methodist Church in California. Before you watch it, just a warning, this turns my stomach today just as much as it did then, but here it is.
A nativity scene at a Claremont church is turning heads. CBS 2's Laurie Perez has a look at the political take on the normally tame tradition. Laurie, not your typical nativity scene.
So here's my question now to that church. Will you be displaying that nativity scene again this year? And if not, how come? During the Trump administration, there was constant criticism of him, of his rhetoric, which, granted, at times may have been justified criticism. Criticism of his policies, in particular in regards to the border. Criticism coming out of the contemporary church, evangelical church, and the United Methodist Church. And now that the situation is far more dire, now that it is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a true humanitarian crisis, where have all the criticisms gone? It's the same border, it's the same cages, and this time it's even more so and under worse conditions by every objective measure. All of this is the same or worse than it was within 2 to 3 years ago. But I can't help but notice and be frustrated that the criticism and the coverage is not the same now as it was then. So I think I'm well within my right and my right mind to ask, what has changed? No more than a year ago, the criticism of Trump's border policies and the outcomes of those policies could be found nearly everywhere. Churches routinely orchestrated protests, wrote these strongly worded letters to the administration. Yet at the time of this video, I have yet to hear a blip out of those same groups of people who are always at the ready to criticize not so many moons ago. Again, same cages, same or worse conditions. What has changed? Where's the criticism? And forgive me for being frank, but I think it's obvious what has changed. The president. It seems to me from what I can observe that the level of attention and condemnation a crisis as this gets by much of the church, much like the media, depends on who is in charge, rather than what those policies actually equate to, which is dangerous. It means either the church is playing politics, or worse, hang with me here, just like politicians, they don't actually care about the things they purport to care about. Let it be known, I'm not making that accusation against anyone, but I am calling for some serious clarification here. What were the grounds for setting up that caged nativity scene? And what has changed that make it no longer necessary to do so? And if all you can think of is Orange Man bad, why would I believe it had anything to do with the people in the first place? Wouldn't I be more likely to think it was an opportunity for you to just wag your finger at someone? Now, maybe that church in California will prove me wrong. Maybe they will set up that disgusting and sacrilegious nativity scene again this year. In which case, I'll stand corrected. Still disgusted, still outraged, but corrected. And I know some would say, well, Biden's policies are more compassionate. And just because the chaos is there, it doesn't mean he is personally responsible for them. After all, he has good intentions. He has good, heartfelt policies. And of course, I would ask if you would have given Trump that same, if it were the case. But secondly, let me suggest that maybe, just maybe, you have succumbed to ideology over the cold, hard facts of the situation. If an ideology, an idea, or a policy sounds good on paper, but then leads to the humanitarian crisis that we are currently witnessing, maybe that ideology, maybe those policies are part of the problem. And then maybe they need some recalculating and reevaluating. And if you are unwilling to do so, you have yourself become an ideologue. And that is a sad state of affairs for a Christian to be. If you cannot see that the desperation of the situation at the border is worse now than it has been in years, including the previous 4, then I'm led to believe that your contempt for one man has blinded you to truth and reality. And worse, it gives right-minded people the question of whether or not the church, in particular the United Methodist Church, really actually cares about the people. If you cared then, why not now? If you condemned practices and policies that led to that then, why not now? Why is the current president receiving a quite different treatment from the church than his predecessor? These questions need to be asked and answered from our media and church leaders. When I see a politician demand something that they won't or don't do themselves, my first instinct is that they simply don't believe in the very thing that they are demanding from people. And that's something even worse than just hypocrisy. When I see the mainstream media treating one president with disdain and ire for 4 years, only to put on the kid gloves the moment someone they prefer is in office, my instinct, and anyone with a brain can see, they have an agenda. And they will form and they will frame the news to fit that agenda and that narrative. What should Christians think when they see the church then doing much of the same? When the former president is blasted by our denomination up and down for comments he made about a select group of congresswomen, but then those same group of women routinely make horrible anti-Semitic comments so bad that Israel rightly denied them access to their country over some of them, and they are not so much as chastised by the church, what should I think about the church? What should I think about our denomination and its leaders? To truly demonstrate that you care about rejecting evil in every form it presents itself, people need to see you are willing to condemn it from whatever side of the political aisle it presents itself, and from whatever gender or ethnicity it comes from. But I'm sorry, from where I sit, the ratchet seems to only go one way. And please don't give me the whole, well, we can't cover every news story. We can't condemn every bad behavior line from our politicians. Because it's pretty clear and obvious which ones you choose to include and which ones you choose to leave out. Tell you the truth, it's not that subtle. And coincidentally, it's the same tactic as the crooked mainstream media uses. Someone please tell me we're not sinking that low. Are we? Is the future of the United Methodist Church and other large denominations just to be an extension of the, and let's be honest here, an extension of the Democratic Party? Let me be clear on what I'm saying. I'm certainly not saying that the church can't take a stand on social issues, or that leaders can't have an opinion. Clearly, they have theirs and I have mine. What I'm saying is that whatever opinion we hold, whatever standard we are using, and let both sides hear this, we better be willing to hold that standard to anyone. Not just the people, not just the president that we prefer. What I can't stand is a news service that proclaims itself as being objective, but is clearly playing only one side of the field. The blurring that is happening between news and opinion is a cause of alarm and concern for all of America. And when the church leaders claim the same thing, to not have a political agenda, to not have political affiliation, but then they only condemn behavior by certain people, or they refuse to criticize people of certain affiliations, ideologies, or ethnicities, well then clearly there's a similar problem. And so maybe the solution is the same for both of them. Take off the mask. Because again, my particular objection here is not of the church's stance on immigration. Do another video on that. But it's that they claim to have no political affiliation, agenda, or preference. But then there are links on their website that take you over to CNN. And we all know how true, how honest, and how unbiased that network is, right? It's the inability to see the realities in front of them and judge based on what is obvious, what is real, and what is tangible, rather than just a set of ideas. This is what we're seeing. We can't make laws against abortion, says the denomination, because that could have undesired results. Well, you see, that's looking at the idea of sentiment rather than the facts. The fact that every week thousands of innocent lives are taken. They constantly protest gun violence, demanding that there are bans on certain weapons, despite the fact that the weapons they despise so much actually make up for a very small percentage of total firearm homicides. Cling to the idea rather than to the facts. Clinging to the ideology rather than the reality. They call for police reform. Countless articles were written by so much of the church about the pandemic of violence by police against unarmed black men, in spite of the facts. Mainly the fact that the number of unarmed black men killed by the police each year is consistently under 20 in a population of millions. It's not to say those lives lost isn't tragic, and I get it. One is too many. But the way in which it was covered, not just by the news, but by the church, was entirely removed from reality. The cultural ideas of the moment are dictating the church's actions and the church's stances. Everything from the border, to race, to COVID, to ideologies and gender ideologies. And that is a sad state of affairs for the denomination, for the church. We have a crisis, all right, on the border and within the country, within the global church, within our denomination. It should come as no surprise that one of the world's biggest global denominations is being torn apart and will soon likely split in two. It should be no surprise as to why faithful, God-honoring, God-loving people can't seem to find a church to suit them. Some of us seem to be more concerned with the world, ideologies, politics, social issues, while the rest of us are concerned with theology and preparing ourselves to navigate the minefield that is coming our way. More on that on a future video. For now, thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll stop by again soon.